Hi guys, Luke Innes here, doing a new film review. Haven't done one in a little while, a few days now. Thought I should do a review of a movie that I watched recently. Thought it was worth talking about. It's definitely an interesting one, I've got to say. Quite an obscure movie, I think, as far as I can tell anyway. Not many people I've ever seen talking about it. But if you were into kind of straight-to-video horror in the late 80s, you might remember it. It's called Curfew, and it's from 1989. So, the movie was directed by Gary Winnick. It stars Kyle Richards, Wendell Wellman and John Putch. And the plot essentially concerns a pair of brothers who, after being released from prison, after being sentenced for a long time after a killing spree, they take revenge on the people who were responsible for them being locked up. So the psychiatrists, the judge on their trial, the district attorney, and yeah, they go on a second rampage, taking on all these people who were responsible for them being locked up the first time. In tandem with this, a young girl, Stephanie, is going out on a date. She's doing things that teenagers do. She gets caught up in this whole craziness through dint of the fact that her dad was the district attorney on the case. Enter the house, they take them hostage, and yeah, the movie unfolds from there on out. This film is definitely a bit of a curio. It's got to be said, because the director of this movie, unfortunately, he died a couple of years ago. But he, in my lifetime, has made a couple of pretty well-known films. Or at least, I say well-known, they were kind of, you know, fairly big hits at the time. I mean, he's directed things like 13 Going on 30, Bride Wars. Not my cup of tea at all, but he started his career off with Curfew. This movie was actually banned in the UK. The BBFC and their ban hammer were a little bit on the erratic side, to say the least, around that time. There really isn't a great deal. If you look through the list of films that were banned from the 80s and 90s, there's really, and the films that were cut, there's really not a lot of rhyme or reason to what was and wasn't acceptable. It was kind of a bit of a crapshoot. So with this movie, it's kind of cliched in terms of its setup. You know, you've got a daughter who's, you know, a protective parent to trying to, you know, I guess influence her life, and she wants to go off and do her own thing. She's being a bit rebellious and all of this sort of thing. It kind of has a sense of horror cliche about it. The two brothers are, you know, out for revenge and all of that sort of thing. You know, the movie doesn't start off on a great foot, it's got to be said. It all feels a bit slow. There's not a great pace to it, and it takes a while to get going. And on top of that, there's a couple of moments where there are some laugh out loud funny moments, unintentional laughs in the movie. There's a scene where a guy gets killed by getting his head bashed in on like a sort of stone wall hanging type thing. And, you know, as the shot is shown of this guy getting his head smashed on this thing, it's clearly rubber and it's wobbling when the guy hits his head on it. It was in Nail Gun Massacre, you know, the way that the nails are wobbling when they touch the corpse that's got nails in it. It's kind of the same kind of vibe, and I laughed out loud at that. I thought that was hilarious. I was kind of thinking, okay, so this movie, it's going to be goofy, but you know, it could potentially be fun. There's already been a couple of laughs in it, so I thought, okay, we'll stick with this. But then as the film kind of reaches the midway point and enters the sort of proper home invasion section, it really picks up and improves. You know, there's a couple of quite in your face and quite aggressive torture scenes. I mean, they're definitely not the most protracted or brutal or even most violent you've ever seen, but they are fairly effective. There's a scene with some smashed up bottles being laid out as like you know, across the floor and rolling about in glass and that sort of thing. In addition to that, the lead character, Stephanie, is a very interesting character. You know, one of the brothers falls in love with her. And you know, it's kind of already been established that she's, as much as she wants to sort of be a bit rebellious to her parents, she is a really nice girl, and she's you know, got, you know, good morals, and she's, you know, it's one of those things of, you know, the parents, despite what the parents see, she is going to turn out fine, but she kind of has to kind of go through a kind of moral quandary to try and get out of this situation. She plays on the brother's attraction to her to try and use that to get her and her family out of this situation, which is really interesting, and it adds an interesting dimension to a character. I've got to say, this movie is very strong in its second half. Aside from the stuff where it kind of calls back and brings, you know, her friends sort of come to the house and end up in the house and all that sort of thing, that all feels stupid. That's kind of cliched. It's basic slasher movie type stuff, even though this isn't really a slasher movie, but you know what I mean. It's that kind of 80s teenage horror thing going on. Like I said, I've got to say, overall, it's definitely a film that is very weirdly constructed in places. Towards the start, you know, the first half of the film is not very good, but there are a couple of laughs, and then the second half of the film is quite effective at what it does. So it's very much a tale of two halves. Overall, I definitely think this is one worth checking out. It's a bit of a forgotten, I wouldn't say a forgotten gem, but it's definitely a movie that, you know, while it's on, it's pretty entertaining. It's 80 or 90 minutes, I forget, of pretty solid entertainment, even if it's two kind of opposing forms of entertainment. You know, you've got the kind of, you know, the fun bad side, and then the you know, the sort of proper horror movie side. So, you know, overall, I'm going to give Curfew a 6 out of 10. I think this is a movie that once it kind of settles down and settles into itself, it is very good. It's a well put together movie that definitely entertains, albeit, you know, it takes a while to get there. Thank you very much for watching, ladies and gentlemen. There will be, as always, a link to my podcast in the description. It's called Ironcast. Go and check it out. It's all about music, and I'm sure you'll love it. Until next time, I've been Luke Innes, you've been you. See you then.